Something really interesting caught my eye in the last week, which was a piece in the New York Times. Let's throw this up there. It's from Thomas Edsall, who's kind of hit or miss, to be honest. But, Ryan, what he pointed out is that Joe Biden did very well with suburban voters, but Democrats didn't necessarily. And this is something that you and I have talked about here this week, which was about Democratic underperformance kind of under the ticket, where this grand realignment of suburban voters, white suburban educated voters in particular, becoming overwhelmingly Democratic is true in the case of Biden, but not true for down ballot Republicans. What do you make of that?
Well, it's certainly a hole in the Democratic strategy. There are some non-trivial number of voters in these suburbs who wanted a couple of different things. They wanted Trump out of the White House. They made that very clear in 2018 that they were voting against Trump, and they made that clear again in 2020 by electing Joe Biden. But they didn't necessarily want Democrats in full control in Washington. Some of them may have just had personal affinity for their member of Congress, or famously people hate Congress but like their congressman. That's less true as people are becoming more transient and have less of an idea of who their members of Congress are, and as you get more turnover in Congress and name ID goes down. But there's still some of that. But then there's a broader impulse to say that let's have divided government. Now that's not that's not a overwhelming phenomenon. 90+% of voters disagree with that, and they vote straight ticket Democrat or they vote straight ticket Republican. But when you're playing at the margins, and so many Democrats, and people forget this, so many House Democrats won in 2018 by these like 4-digit totals, some 3-digit totals, that if you have a movement of a couple thousand votes, one direction or another, that's going to hurt. And Republicans did better in cities than they had done, and in a game of margins that matters. And so the more that Democrats focused on the suburbs, they ended up losing some working class voters in the city, which they could afford to do if those voters in the suburbs vote straight ticket Dem. But as Edsall points out, they didn't all do that.
Yeah, and I think this is the really fascinating argument that's going to play out on the right and on the left. Because on the left, they can rightfully show, okay, well, you only did this because of Trump. You're really going to hold on to these people going forward? That's what Rahm Emanuel wants. That's what Joe Biden wants. That's what Kamala Harris wants. And on the right, there's going to be the same thing where people like me have said, hey, look, these suburban voters are gone. They're not coming back. Well, maybe they would. If you become the party of Mitt Romney, you can still maintain a permanent minority party of like 47%, but comprised of more suburban voters who might, every once in a while deliver you, a Senate seat, Congress, never will give you the presidency. But a lot of these people are okay with that because as long as they hold control in the Senate and they can block whatever, they don't actually really care about wielding power. So how does it, you wrote a whole book about this, about how to actually, excite voters and all of that. What would your argument be to the people who are trying to make Biden Republicans there and forever?
Well, so, to which people? The one you mean the voters in the suburbs?
The Rahm Emanuels of the vote.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Well, so the argument that Biden made was that, one reason that he deserves the nomination is that he was going to have coattails. He was going to, he was going to win the Senate, and he was going to win that, and he was going to, hold on to the House. The question though was, he never answered the question of why. Why do you want to win the Senate? What are you going to actually deliver for people if you get in there? Democrats don't have an easy path ahead. The idea of a multiracial working class party has never really been effectuated in a serious way in the United States. How you marry this kind of elite suburban white college educated audience with a black and brown working class audience, as well as the black and brown college educated audience, is no easy feat. Republicans in some ways have an easier challenge. Because they're not trying to put together, for the most part, a multiracial coalition. What they're doing is a largely white coalition, but they're making serious inroads with working class voters of color. And what Democrats need to understand is that the working class broadly is multiracial. You know, the higher you get up in the kind of income and elite status world, the more segregated your world becomes. Down at the working class level, black, white, and brown people are working together. They're socializing together. They're telling off-color jokes together.
Yep.
You know, it is a broad community, despite the way that it's thought of more generally. That ought to be a community that Democrats can win with a message that they had, say, during the New Deal era, and throughout, you know, Kennedy, Johnson, et cetera. The fact that they're doing so poorly there portends a real problem for them going forward. You know, and they have thought for a long time that they could write off the white working class, but they could segregate that out, and that those losses would not bleed into the rest of the working class. Yeah. And this election showed that that's not true.
I think that's right.
That there is no wall between those groups, and so you have to appeal to all of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, just another plug to everybody go buy Ryan's book, We Got People. Great book. Really enjoyed it, even though not necessarily agree with everything. And Ryan, it's been so great to have you, man. Thank you. We'll see you later.
It's great to be here.
Thanks again, Ryan. And one more Rising for you right after this.